fully agree with that. Like, listen to music in that language. Like, find your genre, because that's what I do. Listen to, like, radio shows. Like, I'll listen to Japanese talk shows and radio shows or seiyuu events in Japanese. Because it helps. It helps you learn, like, what native speaking sounds like.
It's the Intersectional Podcast, Episode 7. I'm your host, Fahim Kamal.
I'm your other host, Brandon Winchell.
I'm your other host, Lily Remington.
And I'm your final host, Karina Provost.
Yeah, so today's episode is going to be centered around foreign languages, which ones we know and speak at home, which ones we've learned in school, and our experience of them and how we learn them specifically. So, personally, I know 2 foreign languages. I know Bangla, which I learned at home, and Spanish, which I learned at school. For example, a piece of Bangla that I know how to say is "I'm mangsho khele bhalage," which means I like to eat meat. So I don't know if Brandon wants to go on and say something he likes to say.
So I don't know. I don't speak a foreign language at home. My family just speaks English, but I've been in Spanish for 3 years in school. I've been out of practice for a little bit, so I don't know how good my vocabulary and my accent is, but I'll say my name is Brandon. Me llamo Brandon.
Okay, so I guess I'll go next. I mostly speak English at home, but like in and out, we use phrases in German at my house. But then other than that, I've learned Chinese in school for the past 2 years. So I guess an example sentence in Chinese, 你好，我叫Lei Li，我会说中文, which is, hello, my name is Lily Remington, I can speak Chinese.
I guess that leaves me. So I did not learn any fancy language at home, but I did speak 2 foreign languages. I learned Spanish in school, and most of the Japanese I know I learned on my own, but I did take a couple lessons. Something that I can say in Japanese would be kodo wa kotoba yorimo yube ni kataru, which means actions speak louder than words. Because I like that quote.
So much more interesting than what I said.
Well, I mean, I could have just been like, konnichiwa minasan, watashi no namae wa Karina desu, which means I could have just introduced myself, but I don't know, I wanted to be fancy.
I mean, it's not.
I literally
it's
said
not,
me llamo.
No, I like meat, but
that was probably the best one I heard. But
I guess we can go on to our experience of learning language in school, because I assume like everyone knows how someone learns a language at home, right?
Yeah.
Like you just listen.
it just
happens, you know what I mean?
It just like English. Like I don't remember learning English, but I just like know how to speak it.
Actually, since
Yes.
Karina is special in that she like self-studied a language.
Why am I special? What?
I just explained it because you self-studied a language. Maybe we should start with yours. Yeah.
Wait, for like
For
tips
Japanese.
on self-studying a language?
Uh-huh.
Well,
Your experience
I also,
of it, tips, whatever.
Great.
I
So,
go.
Brandon, go ahead.
No.
You also
no.
self-studied French? Is that what you're gonna say?
I was gonna say I also self-studied a
You
language,
used
just not
freaking Quizlet
successfully.
flashcards for a week and then gave up.
No, I used Duolingo. I had a Duolingo streak of easily like 140, and then
Oh my
I
gosh,
forgot
I
it one
can't
day.
with Duolingo. I was so upset with
Duolingo is
Japanese
not the
program.
move.
Mm-mm.
Yeah,
No.
it's definitely not the best way to learn a language. I will say that. But
Yeah. So, funnily enough, as we talked about a lot in the last one of the last episodes, I bought a book. That's how I started. I bought a book. I actually have that book with me because I knew we were recording this episode today. But I literally bought a book because so when you're learning a language, I think, especially if you're teaching yourself a foreign language, the most important thing to know is their alphabet. And if they don't have a specific alphabet, they likely have character sets. So the first step would probably be learn your basic character steps. So I have a book here with me entitled Japanese Hiragana and Katakana for Beginners. So it's how I learned, it's how I, not necessarily how I learned, but definitely how I practiced my katakana and my hiragana every day. And now, even though I haven't like actually actively studied Japanese in probably about 4 to 6 months, I can still write perfectly in hiragana and katakana. The thing about the Japanese language is that it has three different scripts. So there's hiragana, which is their native writing system. There's katakana, which is another native writing system that they use for foreign words, and there's kanji, which is an alphabet that they share with Chinese but don't write exclusively in. So I started by picking up a book. Brandon, is Duolingo all you started with?
Well, okay, so yeah, I mean, I started with Duolingo. I bought a textbook, and then I was like, this is a textbook. I don't want to read a textbook. Even though it probably would have been way more helpful than Duolingo was. I think I got burned out at one point because I didn't really buy the textbook until like later on, and I was kind of just like doing like basic rote memorization of certain words, and like they have like sentences on there, and it's helpful in that you could like see like some of the stuff about like verb conjugation and all that. But it just like it's at one point you look at what they have on there and they don't change it too much, so it just becomes very like repetitive, and you're like, oh, I remember this sentence, and you don't necessarily remember the method by which you get to like translate that sentence and translate the verbs and conjugate them and all that. So it's just like I don't think it's as helpful as like learning more about the process. And that's probably what the textbook would have done more, and it was really cheap because I bought it on Amazon probably a while back for like $8. It wasn't expensive at all, like normal textbooks in like school would be. But I feel like a few of the reasons I was unsuccessful was just because I didn't stay committed, and I didn't like learn about the process as much as I did about just like random words and random like sentences I could say. And I have a basic understanding of Italian, like the very like basic verbs, but obviously I probably couldn't sustain a conversation just because I don't really know too much. Like they give you basic conversational things that are like really important in like certain situations, like how are you and all that, like basic like nouns that you would need to know, but it's just not like a very effective way to go about it, in my opinion.
Right. Yeah, I have to agree with you there because I kind of made a mistake at first as well, is that I kind of like piled up learning vocabulary rather than sentence structure, because it's like, okay, so I also have like a Japanese dictionary, right? So like I got that when I got my first book, and I was like looking for specific words even though I didn't know like the correct sentence structure. Like I know formal sentence structure, but it's not how actual people like speak proficiently in Japanese, because like you shouldn't end up saying like watashi wa like twice in a sentence, like if you're referring to yourself, like that just shouldn't happen. But like if I were referring to this dictionary, like there were other things about it that aren't particularly helpful, because I could be like このような辞書には例ぞ問いが言葉を使った例文が少なくとも2つは載っているはずだ。So like I didn't pick any of that up in this dictionary. In fact, talking about it, because what that whole thing means, that whole like long stretch of words that I just said means, in a dictionary like this, there should be at least 2 sentences for the word fridge. But like this one doesn't really have example sentences, which makes it kind of hard to use efficiently. So it's kind of like sentence structure. Like I'd start with learning their alphabet and then sentence structure before, or like grammar, before trying specifically to learn like how to speak properly, because I think if you don't know like the order in which to say things, no matter what like vocab you learn, it'll be wrong.
I think that's like really important to mention. And I kind of like wanted to like say something about that. Like for people like me, I know all of you guys know languages that have like different characters or different alphabet, or you're learning in some way. I feel like it's really important if you're a beginner and you don't want to get like super discouraged, that maybe you start with a language like French or like Spanish and Italian, because those have like the same alphabet, and obviously it might not be the one you like want to learn in the like long term, but it would really help if you just understood like how you learn that language and understood how like the differences like exist, and then you go on to learning about a different a language with a different alphabet, because I just feel like it's like there's progressions to it. Obviously you don't have to, because Karina, I'm pretty sure you learned Japanese mostly before you learned Spanish, but
I did actually, yeah.
yeah, which is really interesting that I probably could have never done something like that. But I just think, coming from like my perspective, I've never really tried to even learn a language with a different alphabet, because I just get like very like scared or like discouraged, because I think it would be too hard. I think I went on Duolingo and I looked at like Hebrew or Russian one time, and I was like, there is no way I'm gonna be able to do this. So starting with maybe like a language that has like the same alphabet as English. Well, it doesn't have to be English, but I'm speaking in English, so I'm assuming you, yeah. Anyway, I think that's an important stepping stone in terms of like your language learning journey.
I don't know. I kind of disagree with that because, well, like, I didn't really learn, like, at least self-study, like, in school or something, a foreign language that was similar to English before I started learning Chinese. And honestly, perhaps it's just because I had a good teacher, but I don't feel like any bit of my progression or whatever is hindered because like I don't necessarily have the experience of learning a foreign language, and my first foreign language that I'm learning in has a completely different alphabet and is like completely different from English, because like Chinese has tones and the characters look nothing alike, and there's no alphabet in Chinese. You can't just like learn the alphabet and how to write it and then that's how you write characters. Like you just learn each character individually. But I mean, I don't necessarily think like if you have a passion to learn that language, I think either way you'll learn the language. So I don't necessarily think like maybe you should start off with a more like Latin alphabet based language.
Well, I mean, I do think that like it's something to consider. Like I don't think it's necessarily like to discourage
Well,
anybody
yeah.
from trying a language that's maybe like outside of their like typical realm of understanding. But like I think that I would say statistically speaking it is easier for like native English speakers to learn Latin based languages, and I think
Well, yeah.
and I just think, like, personally, I guess, in that aspect, that it's something to consider, that if they're looking for something that isn't, like, too much to learn or like, drastic when studying, like, I think it might be a good place to start if somebody is trying to become, like polylingual.
That's fair. I mean, I guess like if you're just wanting to learn a foreign language and perhaps you're wanting to learn it quickly, then I would go with one that's more Latin based or like Germanic based or something, because like you to like become fluent in Chinese, you have to study like a total of like, or Japanese or Korean or something like that. You have to study like 2,200 hours or something like that, whereas opposed to um a Latin based or a Germanic based language, it's like significantly less. It's only in like the hundreds place and like the low hundreds place. So I guess if you're just wanting to become fluent in a language, that's fine. But like if you're not passionate about learning that language, but you're passionate about learning a language that's completely different, then just like go for that one.
Yeah. I wasn't necessarily like trying to discourage people from learning languages that may be more difficult for English speaking or native English speakers to learn. I was just it might come from the fact that at one point I was like, "Oh, I have aspirations to learn more than this language, more than Italian. I wanted to learn like a bunch of different languages." And I guess passion is the number one thing, of course. So if you want to just go and learn like Korean, or you want to learn a language with a different alphabet, and you don't have aspirations to necessarily like continue and keep learning like other languages, then obviously just go for it. But I think I had more of a mentality. I was thinking about like when I was like super interested in polyglots, and I was like, oh, I want to be like them. I want to learn, or I want to speak all these different languages and be fluent in them. And I think at that time I was thinking learn the easier languages and then at that point you
Mm.
won't become discouraged, and then you'll be like, oh, this is really cool, I learned how to do it, and then you like it was like a stepping stone like type thing. I would
Mm.
just like do languages that were easier, and then I would progressively get harder. But obviously, like,
Got
it's
you.
what you want to do, and there's no way you won't be able to learn a language with a different alphabet if you don't like do another one first. Like, it's not a prerequisite. I'm just like, that was just probably the way I was thinking about it, and
Mm-hmm.
you could definitely do it. Like, there's
Also,
nothing stopping you.
while we're kind of on the topic of like things that would dissuade you from learning a language, this is a little bit of a stretch, but I think it was kind of in there somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Um, don't listen to like stigmas or people trying to discourage you from learning a language or telling you you only learned this language because of this. Like if you like anime and want to learn Japanese, go for it. But
Mm-hmm.
like don't let people calling you like a weeb stop you from learning the language if you're passionate about it, or like
Yeah.
if you're trying to learn Korean and someone's like ew K-pop stan, which I don't know why anyone would do that because I don't know.
Yeah.
Um just like do what you want. Learn the
Mm-hmm.
language. You've already come this far. Even if you've barely started, you've already come this far. You found your motivation to start. That says a lot. I
Yeah, because go ahead.
I just say personally that like there's so many stigmas that surround people like teasing or making fun of others for learning specific languages, and I just don't think that that's right because if you're learning a language, then clearly you have the motivation to and the passion to and the dedication to, and I think those are a lot of very important qualities, and it says a lot about you as a person. Learning languages is cool.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. I completely agree because, like, in the end, the goal, I believe, of learning a language is to be able to communicate with people and, like, understand a different culture. And
Yeah.
so, even still, if your motivation stemmed from the fact that you like anime or you like listening to K-pop or you liked listening to Despacito or something like that, like, honestly, I don't understand why people get so like uptight about like why somebody decides to learn a language, because in the end if they truly have the passion to learn the language they will, and the end goal is like communicating and exchanging with a culture that's like not your own, and like just learning from other people. So yeah, I completely agree with you there.
So what I was gonna say is in like high school, like the standard three languages, the options you have is like Spanish, French, or Chinese, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know
Yeah.
about
Chinese
Chinese.
or
Chinese just might be
German,
us, but like
it's
No,
it's
No,
usually
Chinese
in
is
it's
usually there.
sometimes
Chinese or
Italian too,
German
but
or German in
yeah.
the Midwest, a lot of German.
so we all chose Chinese except or Spanish
No,
Wait, none of us chose
no.
Chinese except Lily. We all
except
chose
Lily,
Spanish.
right? So I was gonna ask Lily why she chose Chinese specifically and why others might want to
Uh,
as opposed to like the bandwagon route of Spanish.
okay, honestly, I've been asked this question so many times, and it's like I don't necessarily know why I chose Chinese. I just, when looking originally, okay, I never really wanted to take Spanish. Everybody took Spanish, and it's not that I wanted to be like different or take the hard way. It's just I just didn't feel a connection to Spanish, and I wasn't passionate about learning it, so I knew even if I was in a classroom for it, like I wouldn't care, and I would just use Google Translate for every single one of my assignments. And then I was actually pretty interested in learning French going in, like at the end of eighth grade. I was like, maybe I'm gonna pick up French, but then like, well, I just heard things kind of about our French teacher at school, and then also like in the same way, I didn't really feel a connection, and so I guess my only other option was Chinese, and but at the like I guess my whole life, because my dad originally like worked at a Chinese restaurant. He was like a manager for a Chinese restaurant when I was a kid. So it's like there was always this culture, like the food of this culture that I was being surrounded by, and I had a bunch of Chinese friends, but I had no idea beyond that. And I just think that like the writing system is really beautiful. And personally, I don't think it's that hard, but maybe that's because I like art. And so each character is like, it's like an ideogram. So it's supposed to represent the idea. And I guess I can see it. So it's easier for me to remember it and remember how to write it. But I don't know. I just thought it was like so much more beautiful and rich in history and culture, and I just didn't really feel a connection to Spanish or French that much. So I was just that was my only other option, but I mean, I'm really happy that I took that chance.
Yeah, and then uh, I was actually going to stick with Japanese for all of high school. Like I wasn't going to continue Spanish. So I like started learning Japanese in 6th grade, and obviously my middle school didn't offer Japanese. My middle school offered Spanish 1, and that was it. And so I took Spanish 1 in middle school, and my freshman year, the school that I went to did offer Japanese. So I did end up taking Japanese in school for a year, and the only thing that helped me do or helped me learn was grammar and particles, which wasn't even that helpful because I knew all of the vocab already, and I knew how to write already.
You basically aced
Like-
that class. Was it only like Japanese
I
1?
ended yes, it was only Japanese 1. I did end one of those quarters, I think, with like 121%.
Was there like higher level classes, or like was there a
There
possibility?
were, yeah. It continued all the way to the IB level because IB offers
wow.
offers
Yeah,
Japanese as an HL.
Why did they put you into like a higher Japanese?
Was there like no
Because
way
I
you could
didn't know
like
kanji.
test?
Oh.
That
I
makes sense.
didn't know any kanji at the time, so I didn't I had the aptitude for everything except for kanji to test into Japanese too.
That really sucks.
It really does. But it was kind of my own undoing because I had put off learning kanji for so long, and it's really important.
Yeah.
But the thing that I was kind of getting at there was that like because I had already taken 1 year of Spanish and 1 year of Japanese and had to switch schools, I just continued with Spanish. And I guess it's kind of like I didn't really have the same like passion or invigoration for learning Spanish that I did for Japanese. And when you're learning multiple languages simultaneously, things can get really confusing.
Facts.
I don't know, but I feel like a lot of people don't regret the language they take though, unless it's like a teacher or something else. But like they kind of just choose and they're just in that path. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't regret it. That's not what I mean. I just mean that like
You didn't have the
If
same
given the
like
choice, if Green Valley had a Japanese program, you would be taking Japanese instead of Spanish.
exactly.
I
And doing much better in it. Go ahead, Brandon.
I was just gonna say, like, when I was gonna choose, I think one of the main reasons I chose Spanish, was because like I just knew so many people in it, and I felt like I could get more help from like, people like our peers, I guess, like my friends and like people our age, because I was actually thinking about taking French. But I was just like, oh, everyone's taking Spanish. Like, all my friends are probably going to take Spanish. If I need help with that, I could ask them. But I didn't know anyone taking French. So if I was going to take French, I was like, I'll be screwed. And I'd have to go ask the teacher. And like Lily said, there's, like, stuff about our teacher, just, like, the amount of, like, work. I won't go into specifics, but it's just, like, I didn't want to do that. And there's a lot more, like, Spanish teachers than any other. There's one French teacher, one Chinese teacher, and probably like how many 8 Spanish teachers at our school, or 6 or something.
There's a
There's a
lot of
ton.
Spanish teachers.
Yeah. Just because the amount of people that take it, and I feel like that was the main reason I chose it, was because of fear that I wouldn't have as many people like learning it with me. And I feel like that's a big part of like my experience learning a language, is I need like people who like also understand or are trying to learn it, that I could talk to about like not like necessarily in that language, like that would help probably, but just like talk about like our experiences and like what we might need help with. So I feel like that's one thing that turned me off from the other two.
And that's a good
find that
thing
really-
too. Like having a support group to learn a language with.
Yeah.
I find that really interesting because, like, I remember on my first day of Chinese class, I looked around the room and I didn't know a single kid in the room. And then my Chinese teacher was like, I'm going to be teaching this class in 90% Chinese. And I was like, yeah, I'm about to fail this course. But then, like, I mean, obviously, she didn't end up speaking 90% in Chinese, like, probably in the higher level classes she did. But
Yeah.
for our class, I mean, she did speak in some, and then we just would like absorb those phrases, like when she would say take out your paper, take out your homework, she would just say it in Chinese, and then we would just have to like figure it out. And like I think that was like a really helpful thing. But even though I didn't really have any friends, I think like the fact that like there's only one teacher at our school, so I just had like a much closer relationship. I have a much closer relationship with our the Chinese teacher at our school. And then
Mhm.
personally, I benefit a lot from like one-on-one help rather than like friends, especially I feel like in a language like Chinese where it's like most of the kids learning Chinese were not Chinese, at least in like the lower levels. And so if I asked them for help, I couldn't always like guarantee that it was right. And so having like a more one-on-one help, I feel like helps my experience. So I just find it interesting that you say that.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
feel like one thing is like my personality. I'm not the type of person like I don't want to go ask a teacher for help. Like that's something I don't enjoy doing, and it brings me a lot of anxiety. And I feel like
Mm-hmm.
just having like those people around me that I like talk to every day, that I'll like joke around with and all that, like I just feel like there is like some sort of like familiarity with them, and I like don't have to be like super serious, and I feel like I'm gonna get judged by my teachers if I like go ask them a question. So like even when I'm in these classes and I have questions about stuff, I rarely go and ask them. Sometimes I'll even like go home and I'll look a question up online as opposed to like asking them in person, just because like that fear. And that's like that's like how I would explain my like opposition to that. And I feel like it brings me also like a lot of anxiety when like there's like native speakers in my classes and I'm just messing up their language right now. I just like
But
continue.
sometimes I feel like making mistakes is the best way to learn them.
Well, yeah.
Like in my opinion, because if I mess something up and then somebody's like, "Dude, you said that totally wrong," I will remember that embarrassment for the rest of my life.
I
And
just
I will like then that's how I'll like get better. But that's just me.
Lily's
no,
just bold.
I agree. I'm
No.
not that bold though. That's the thing. I don't want to make those mistakes in the first place.
I mean,
So,
it's really embarrassing, honestly,
hmm
but
What Lily said a minute ago actually did remind me of something, like how you kind of like picked up those phrases that she said very often.
hmm
And I think culturally that was one of the things that I really really loved about my Japanese class, is that my Japanese teacher did that a lot, but we would always start class like the way that they would authentically in Japan,
Yeah.
which is with like the class leader with the kirits de and then ohayo gozaimasu sensei. Because I don't know, I really thought that learning about those like literal cultural nuances
Yeah.
on like how they start class in Japan, and doing that every day helped me form like a bigger attachment to the culture of the language that I was learning.
Yes.
And I thought that was really cool. And then also, when she would introduce things, like if we had quizzes, she would always tell us to prepare for a short test, which is like an abbreviation of short test, so quiz. Um, or like take out your end pizza. So it's all of those little things that I couldn't remember the full sentences for at the moment, but
yeah.
it's just
I
I liked it.
Something that's
yeah.
similar was like Mr. like mira tu compañero y le buenas tardes.
Yeah, every day,
Every day.
It was
Buenos
kind of funny.
dias.
Can't
Buenos
relate.
dias.
Yeah,
Buenos dias.
he would repeat it like 3 times. It was always it was funny, but it was a good practice.
My favorite would always Feliz Viernes.
Oh yeah, and then he would be like, "Buen fin de semana,"
Buen
like,
fin de semana.
and it made me sad when he would like say stuff to people when they're leaving, and they didn't say anything back, and I was like, "Sad, Mister."
That's our Spanish teacher, if you guys didn't know, or one of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't relate. I can't relate right now.
I still think the only reason I passed Spanish 2 was because my notebook was pretty.
Oh yeah, there's like I feel like the lower level Spanish classes in Spanish 1, I had this teacher and a lot of people didn't like her, and I feel like a lot of people at the Spanish 1 level don't try hard enough to like actually learn, and they're not in there to learn. They're in there because they're like, "Oh, I need to take a foreign language for high school," like cuz it's a require. I don't know if it's a requirement. It's not a requirement
It's
anymore,
a
but
requirement
for
for
the advanced
advanced.
honors, yeah.
Yeah.
So, those people that want to like get those advanced honors diplomas but don't have any motivation to learn as foreign language, they're just in those classes like Spanish 1 and Spanish 2, and a lot of the time they're like messing around, and the teachers at some point they just get like really wild with like extra credit stuff and just like extra credit for random stuff. One time I drew like a smiley face on like this index card thing we were doing, and then she was like, extra credit emoji. And I was like, why did I get extra credit for adding an emoji? And I ended that class, I don't know if both semesters, but I ended, I think the first semester with like 125%. Like it's just like those classes, some people like don't care so much to the point where the teachers need to offer such like extra credit, and I just feel like
exactly.
I feel like that is bad for like the people who actually do want to learn, and then the class just becomes chaotic.
It's like they feel like they have to get them motivated for anything, because I know like even in our Spanish 3 class, like 3 years into this language, we still had people who wouldn't answer questions unless our teacher was giving out pesos, and pesos was like the extra credit system. So like he gave us extra credit based on how many we had at the end of the quarter. And because school got cut out, I still have like 22 pesos in my backpack.
I have 3 on my desk right now.
But yeah, exactly. And it's like, I will admit that did give a little boost to me as well in terms of motivation. But like, for the kids who literally only ever participated because there was extra credit available.
Yeah.
I mean,
It's weird to me
sad.
that
Honestly,
it happens in the upper ones. Sorry. Go ahead, Lily.
Yeah.
no, you're good. This like brought, I guess, like 2 things that I kind of wanted to address. Like, one being just, I feel like we should maybe touch on like what we feel is the problem with learning foreign languages in America, because if you look around across the globe, and not even just like there, you have to learn a second language, and most of the time that's English because that's like lingua franca, that's what we communicate in. But even in places like England, where like they speak English, they still have a much higher rate of learning foreign languages. So I kind of wanted to, because we were kind of going there, and then I also like, we can like cut this part out, but like later I kind of wanted to touch on, because Karina and I were talking about how like just saying those phrases over and over again, and then you just learn that. So I kind of, we could bring that into like the tips and tricks of learning a foreign language and being immersed in that language.
Okay.
I also wanted to ask Fahim what it was like learning learning another language at home.
It
We
was
haven't touched
like,
on that.
yeah, it was like I never formally learned it, right? I didn't like actively try to learn it. It was just absorbed into me.
Like you didn't get a textbook.
You don't.
Like
You
I
don't know how to.
Like you just speak it, and then you just absorb it.
It's really weird because I don't even know the alphabet. I just know how to
Yeah, I was
speak
gonna
it.
ask. You don't know how to write it, do you?
No.
Or read it? Or
Yeah.
you said you.
It's just
Okay.
conversational, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
It's very
I just absorbed
interesting.
it through it. But on Lily's point on like why America isn't as good on teaching foreign languages, one thing in particular in our district is that some foreign language classes are just way too big. Like Spanish class does not have to have like 40 people in it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like last year, my Spanish class, me and Karina's Spanish class actually had only like 19 people. But the
Yep.
lower level classes are the ones that are way overcrowded.
The year before that, our Spanish, so like Brandon and I have taken the last 2 years of Spanish in the same class. Our class this year had between like 18 and 19 people. And the year
Yeah.
before that, our class had probably about 30 kids in it.
And then yeah, when I was in Spanish 1, the year before I had a class. I don't know if it was for like 40, but it was definitely more than we had in our class last year. So or
Now-
2 years ago is what I'll say.
I know class overcrowding is very specific to school and district, like the school that you attend and the district that you're in, because, like, for example, my friends in LA, whose school has, I think, literally 200 kids in it, like their entire school,
That's crazy.
they're limited in what foreign languages that they can take. And I'm actually pretty sure their only option, I'll have to ask one of them later, but I know that they all just signed up to take ASL, so American Sign Language. And their classes are small compared to ours, and
Yeah.
most
Yeah.
in most classes, the rest of us, like not even foreign language classes, we're just rocking, I don't know, 30 to 40 kids a class, and they're sitting there at like 18, 12, 20.
Yeah.
Yeah, but conversely, I kind of want to bring up like I think it's interesting because you guys experience classroom overcrowding, but me in Chinese, like I'm going to be the only kid in IB Chinese, and I think I might be the only kid doing AP Chinese this year,
Mm-hmm.
like being in that class because like wh- in dealing with things like classroom overcrowding, it's like I don't understand, I guess, why they don't take some of the kids out of Spanish and put them into other foreign languages at our school that don't have any kids and are honestly barely being supported because of the lack of kids who want to
Yeah.
take the language because you might like learn something amazing and new from just taking a language other than Spanish that everyone is accustomed to because when you're in an overcrowded classroom setting, you don't get that much one-on-one help. And I was kind of saying earlier how I believe that that is something that has like really helped me progress in my Chinese because if there's just too many kids, the teacher can only do so much to help each kid.
Yeah. The only thing is like since foreign languages are labeled as like electives, I feel like they can't just like force people to take
Mm.
different languages. And
That's fair, but also they didn't put me in Chinese my first year of high school and they put me in art, which I didn't want to take in the first place, and they wouldn't let me leave it.
You
So,
are, however, an incredibly talented artist.
thank you, Karina.
It's weird because it's like it's mandated on the transcript, so I don't know why it's an elective. Like it should just be like you have to take
I
two
I
two
don't know.
years, like, and we get to choose what you get to take.
What do you mean we get
Well,
to choose? Like they put you
It,
in one?
I mean, I wouldn't really mind
well, if there's
learning any other language.
overcrowding,
Yeah, in terms of
I
if
overcrowding.
well, yeah, but I feel like they just can't do that. Like, what if you're like someone who really wants to learn Spanish, and there's just like so many people that really want to learn Spanish, and then you get put in like Chinese, and you didn't want to learn that. Like, obviously, I
They
feel
okay,
like
but
you might have motivation.
prioritize credit over desired placement.
See, this is the thing though. The
I
vast
don't know.
majority of people in those Spanish classes ain't be wanting to learn Spanish.
No, a lot of the people in those Spanish classes, I feel like,
exactly.
don't want to learn anything about any foreign languages, which is why I feel like this is more of like a deeply cultural thing, and like the fact that we're not like encouraged to be bilingual as like people in other countries
Yeah.
are. So I guess in that aspect, it's like, in my opinion, I don't know if that would like help, just because I feel like even if those kids were put in something else, they wouldn't want to do it either.
Also, just
I
like a
mean,
parallel to that, even the kids in our English classes are tired of learning English.
Mm-hmm. I
I
can
think it's
see
just
that.
like perhaps just a problem systemically with the American education system in
Yeah.
general,
Which we could
in
probably get
that,
Oh,
into for an entire episode.
wait, I
yeah,
wanna
and just
mention
that,
one thing based on what Lily just said. Um,
Mm-hmm.
we shouldn't be like teaching foreign languages beginning in high school. They should be like happening a lot earlier than
yeah.
that.
Oh yeah, no.
Hmm.
They actually are at private schools.
Well, anyway, there's a ton of evidence stating that people learn languages a lot better at younger ages. So it only makes sense that we teach. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I know.
And there's some schools that do that for
It's
sure, but it's not on a huge scale at all.
Yeah, I went to a private school in kindergarten, so I did take Spanish in kindergarten.
and I mean honestly, I just feel like foreign languages is just something that should be emphasized more in America because just because there's signs in another country that have translation to English doesn't mean that every person there can proficiently speak English. And it's not even necessarily for that purpose. It's just like broadens your perspectives to and it opens your mind to other cultures. And so I don't know, that's just my opinion. I just think it should be emphasized more.
Well, I mean, I think that part of it is because America is very ethnocentric.
Yeah,
Yes.
and I guess it's still like people are like, oh, there's no need to do it, and obviously there's like probably not as much practical application as like day-to-day conversation, but I feel like the enlightenment you get from learning a language is
Hmm.
something people don't like often recognize. and I feel like it should be emphasized
Yeah.
more. And I guess it's kind of hard for them to just be like, oh, you guys are all like gonna learn Spanish. Like I don't think someone who's that young could necessarily like choose if they wanted to learn something else. But I just feel like I agree with Karina in that we're just like very like focused on ourselves and our own culture, and we don't like immersing ourselves in other cultures. And I feel like that's an issue in America as a
Right.
Yeah,
whole.
because
And then like
people
Sorry, go
go
ahead.
through no, you're fine. People like go through stores, and if they're not speaking in English, there's that one racist person who's like, "This is America, you should speak English." So perhaps if foreign languages were more emphasized, America would just be,
Exactly. And that's just like the
slightly
fact.
better, more understanding place to live in.
Right, and that's just like that's just what it is. Like America's an extremely ethnocentric country. It's like people walk around believing that America is the best country in the world, and that's like the most.
Not.
It is not. But also when I had a friend who was learning Arabic to better communicate with her family, and she was practicing in public and reading a book on Arabic, and somebody was literally yelling at her in public about that, and I'm just like, hello, your xenophobia is showing.
Yeah,
People just need to be more kind.
it makes
to each
me
other,
mad.
bro. Like about what Lily was talking about in the store. Like you need to speak English in America. Like why do you care? Just like move
Like
on.
Exactly.
it's like
It's like I just try to tell my mom that we need to get bread. Like, chill out.
And
yeah,
then some people are like on the phone, right? And they're like, I want you to translate what you're saying. It's like this is a private conversation. Like what do you mean?
Exactly. It's like, are you like wanting to barge in on my conversation? Like, just leave.
like it's not like we're spying on America or something.
I'm
Like
just,
if
I'm
we're
just trying to
speaking
get
a different
home,
language.
dog.
Yeah, I don't understand it. And it's just like it's a deeply rooted issue.
It makes no sense. Their actions
It
make
doesn't
no
make
sense.
sense. It doesn't make any sense. But I just don't know how I don't know how you fix the mentalities of those people.
It's like those people like I don't know what's the word is. It's like they like
Close-minded.
go into their fear. Like I don't know what the word is for that, but they're the reason why there's
Manifest?
what happened?
Manifest?
I don't know if it's manifest. They just cling on to their fear, and so they like use their racism as a means to like explain their fear.
Kind of like a inferiority complex.
Yeah. I guess people. I think.
Well,
I
like the
think this
Arabic.
is-
Wait, let me get this out. Like the Arabic thing,
Yes.
I swear it's because like that person.
People are
people are
like
like
scared.
9/11.
like yeah, they're scared of 9/11, so they're like racist towards
Yeah.
people who speak Arabic.
I think that's like a very like popular idea in like psychology that fear like dictates most of what we do as like humans. And I in this case scenario I agree with you because I don't exactly know why they're using very overly exaggerated like stereotypes about certain groups of people and then just applying it because they're scared of like what might happen. And I don't know exactly why they're scared, but
This is what we call propaganda.
yeah, we are getting a little political, but
Well, I mean,
But,
I think it's relevant when talking about foreign languages.
oh no, definitely. I feel like there's certain people that don't want their children to learn a foreign language, and it doesn't make sense to me because it's like there's nothing like if you learn a foreign language, like they don't like other people speaking it, they don't want their children to learn it. Like I don't get what about the foreign language is inherently like damaging or dangerous.
Especially when it's like no multilingual or bilingual person has ever said like I resent learning this language. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like it's never
Yeah.
anything negative with the person who's learning it. So
Yeah.
So I think that, like, honestly, I think we've kind of bounced around a lot, and I think that, like, from covering kind of like how you pick up languages to like the motivation to learn different languages and stuff, and also talking about like the prejudice that surrounds like specific like our specific nationality versus you know learning other languages. I think that we've been talking for a really long time.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys want to briefly cover like some tips you guys have for learning
Yeah,
languages before we close out. But
yeah.
we've been going for a while and we don't want to keep you guys too long.
Number one probably is to be immersed. That's how I learned Bangla,
Mm-hmm.
and I
Hmm.
would say it's like my second
That's
to
that's the
English.
most important thing.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. I
Hmm.
fully agree with that. Like, listen to music in that language. Like, find your genre, because that's what I do.
Mm-hmm.
Listen to like radio shows. Like, I'll listen to Japanese talk shows and radio shows or seiyuu events in Japanese. Because it
Yeah.
helps. It helps you learn like what native speaking sounds like.
Yeah, and if you have the opportunity to go to that
Yeah.
country, like don't revert to like speaking English, like try to speak to natives in that language. You know, if you mess up, you mess up, but it's okay. There's thousands of programs out there for you to get scholarships to study abroad. Personally, I just completed like the NISLY NSLIY scholarship, and like technically I was supposed to go to China or Taiwan, but I couldn't because of coronavirus. But even still, we had classes and they were completely taught in Chinese.
Mm-hmm.
And my Chinese level prior to this program versus after has been like astronomical. It's like just immerse yourself in the language, watch TV, speak to people. There's plenty of apps where you can speak to native speakers in that language, and like try if you can, and if your parents are willing to, apply to programs like NSLIY or Star Talk or CLS in college. It's just very beneficial. Highly recommend.
I
Mm-hmm.
do want to add, though, for those of you interested in learning Japanese, if you're a fan of anime, that's great, but don't try and learn Japanese through it, because as much as anime is spoken in Japanese, it none of it's not proper. It's not how you'd speak to a stranger. It's not how you'd speak to a parent. Like, oftentimes you'll hear people say phrases like yoku
Go
dekimashita. Like,
die.
oh yeah, that too. But like, for example, yoku dekimashita is like a derogatory way of saying well done, you know. But sometimes parents will say it to children. It's like the way you talk to a child, or the nasai verb tense. It's also the way they speak is very rude, because like if you were telling somebody to kindly do something, you would end, or politely do something, it would end with the te, it would end with te, not ro or re. So it's just like there's so many little nuances that you don't catch if you're trying to learn through specific types of media. So I guess that leads me to do your research.
Mm-hmm.
Do your
Facts.
research, find out what you can learn through and what you can learn from that's like viable.
Yeah. One more thing. You're speaking on like the diversification of like what you're like immersing yourself in, and I just wanted to say like I wanted to say this like a while ago, but then I forgot, and now I finally remembered. I think that's one reason why learning Italian for me was like unsuccessful, was because I didn't really go the extra step to immerse myself in like the culture as much, and I didn't go on like apps to try to speak to natives about it, or like speak to natives in Italian. I just like kind of did Duolingo, and I kind of like read a little bit of the book and like all that, but I didn't really go that extra step to put myself in the culture and to see different forms of like media that use the Italian language, and that was the reason why it just didn't come to me as easily as like a lot of you guys are talking about how your languages come to you. And like even Spanish
Yeah,
class, being immersed in like a classroom setting where we're supposed to speak Spanish, that helped more.
yeah, and just like also being immersed also just helps with your pronunciation, because I know so many people who they don't want to use their foreign language because they know that they sound like a foreigner, but honestly, you'll always have an accent, and you don't judge people who speak English with an accent. So
Yeah.
no one's probably going to judge you if you speak your foreign language with a slight accent. The pronunciation is still important, especially in tonal languages like Thai or Chinese. So like there are plenty of like websites and stuff. Like for Chinese, there's this website called Diablo where you can just drill and drill and drill practicing your tone pronunciation. But honestly, don't be too scared about having an accent, more so in languages that aren't tonal based, because if you say something wrong, you could be asking for your mom, or you could be asking for some hemp, or you could be asking for a horse. So like in that case, it's kind of important. But in a language like Spanish, like try to work on your pronunciation, but don't be embarrassed of speaking to a foreign, like a person who speaks Spanish natively.
Mm.
I think that's important as well. And then also, it's like, make sure that when you're learning vocabulary, you learn all of the meanings associated with that word. Because especially for Japanese, words double up. And because you reminded me of this by talking about pronunciation. And they have the same pronunciation. They are spelled the same thing, the same way, pronounced the same way. But the only difference is context. So, like, hana means both flower and nose. You definitely want to know both of the possibilities for those definitions. Or sekai. Sekai means world, and also sekai means correct. So, like, make sure you're thorough, I'd say.
Yeah. And like,
Oh!
yeah.
Go ahead, sorry.
No, go ahead.
This is really important. I like how, like, earlier how I mentioned, like, starting with learning that character set or alphabet or whatever, especially for languages like Japanese and Chinese and Korean, where you have to learn an entirely new set of characters. Do that first.
Practice.
Do not try and learn in Romaji or, like, Romanized English letters for those words, because it will throw all of your pronunciation off.
Yeah, honestly, learn alongside, like, if for Chinese, like, I learned the characters alongside the pinyin, but I didn't exclusively learn pinyin and then try and look at the characters. Or like in Taiwan, instead of using pinyin, they use this thing called like juin, which is like honestly much more helpful, and it's not romanized at all. So if you're starting learning Chinese, honestly start learning with that rather than pinyin, so that you don't have to like always fall back on looking at the English or the romanized version.
If we missed anything, and you guys want us to specifically talk, like, to talk on a specific language, or if you want us to cover more specific tips, or more, like, adequately talk about how we individually learned and processed the culture of the languages that we learned, we have a contact form on our website, which is in the bio of our YouTube channel, Instagram, and Twitter, which you can find us at the Intersectional Podcast on all of those platforms, or in Twitter's case, at the Intersect Pod, because of character limits. We are on Spotify, YouTube, and a whole bunch of other podcast platforms. So if you're interested in hearing more, be sure to check out our previous episodes and the ones coming next. Thank you all so much for listening.
Thank you.